The global economy is reorganizing itself around great power rivalry, and of course Singapore is affected by that. And it also needs to be seen as a very open, transparent place that really abides by the rules. Yeah, so I think this is a critical area for Singapore. Singapore has remained very transparent. It has enforced very consistently a rules-based framework around doing business. Corporations like that. That's an environment where corporations can thrive. So Singapore will have to continue to do that going forward to be successful. For Singapore, very sensitive and also a very delicate kind of situation because globally the United States has its own set of core interests that it would like Singapore to align with. And of course China has its own set of core interests. So for Singapore, it's going to have to be very mindful of things like export controls and sanctions, the bifurcation, if you will, of the technology stack between pro-Western, the US, and pro-China. That's going to factor into how Singapore manages its relations. First involves supply chains. So as we see more export controls and we see more sanctions being leveled against specific entities, many of them in China, those Chinese companies are responding by moving their supply chains out of China into places in Southeast Asia. That becomes a very sensitive point for Singapore-US relations. The other area has to do with mostly Chinese big tech companies are moving their headquarters to Singapore to get out from under the sort of the overarching umbrella, if you will, of the Chinese Communist Party when it comes to handing over data. Singapore is committed to no data localization, transparency, and so forth. So I think this is a critical area. Singapore is very unique as a city-state to produce policies that the government can follow up on. And so I think in terms of developing local businesses, Singapore will continue to work with the business community through public-private partnerships, and it will also continue to upskill and invest in worker competence and skill set. I think Singapore has very strong industrial policy. But it also has managed to attract a lot of the world's top brands, top companies. So I think getting the balance right between government policy, techno-nationalist policies, where the government is looking to encourage certain kinds of growth in certain kind of sectors, but getting that balance between that and letting the market, right, letting market forces continue to dictate, I think is going to be very important. Singapore is not alone in having to deal with an aging population, right? So three fundamental ways that Singapore can deal with this. First is it can increase the amount of immigration. The second is that it can look to increase productivity, right? So it can look to AI, it can look to technology. So even though population is shrinking, productivity is increasing. The third way is it can try and promote population growth, right? Which has not been particularly effective. I think Singapore should be able to sort of increase its safety net, if you will, for its population, either for unemployment or for an aging population, without compromising the marketplace. And I think there are a couple of reasons for that. First, Singapore's got plenty of money in its coffers. It's not going to go bankrupt, providing a little extra help to unemployed. And I think secondly, Singapore has been committed to training its workforce. So I think they should be able to manage that going forward. Indonesia is a very exciting place right now for the digital economy, right? There are many unicorns. Indonesia, the last time I checked, had more unicorns than any other country, certainly in Southeast Asia. And whether we're talking about fintech, whether we're talking about clean tech, logistics tech, those are all areas that I think are full of promise from a digital trade standpoint. And of course, in terms of trade and commodities, I think that will continue as well. So Indonesia can provide a lot of different commodities, from oil to foodstuffs, I think, which is very important for the relationship. Investment flows two ways. Certainly the property markets here will benefit as investments flow into Singapore, particularly as a result of decoupling from China and de-risking. Singapore, I think, is going to have to be very, very mindful of this so-called concept of Singapore washing. What kind of money is coming into Singapore, and how might those investments affect Singapore's relationships with the United States? So Indonesian investment is also an area that needs to fall under Singapore's very close scrutiny when it comes to rules-based investment and when it comes to transparency. Singapore just needs to continue to be Singapore, and that means it has to remain very well connected, but it also has to be a place that applies the rule of law very consistently, very fairly, that it welcomes foreign investment, but again, that foreign investment has to abide by fair market rules, fair trade rules. And if Singapore continues to push in the direction of the modern 21st century economy, I think Singapore will continue to fare very well. I think there are two very, very important underlying technologies that we're going to see a lot of activity in and a lot of demand. And one, of course, is the building of new data centers. As the digital economy expands, as there are more devices that are connected, there is a need for more data centers, and there is a need for more cloud infrastructure. So in Indonesia, as that economy expands, how can Singapore, through various partnerships with businesses, benefit from all of it? The other, I think, is clean tech. How can Singapore grow its economy and grow its trading relationships with Indonesia around this need to decarbonize the global economy and to build these smart clean tech networks, right? So these are very, very important.